Hello.
All right, all right, all right,
There
all
we go.
right. So,
All right.
okay, hold on. Let me do this. All right, so we're all good on the format. Like 5 minute openers, hour open dialogue, 5 minute closers.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna just do this introduction here. So, hello and God bless everybody. Welcome. We're gonna be having a debate between Unitarian Universalist and an Eastern Orthodox on the topic of, do all Abrahamic religions worship the same God? So Jackson is the affirmative. He's going to be going first. But first, the format of this debate is going to be 5 minute opening statements for each, um, followed by an hour of open dialogue, and then 5 minute closing statements. Uh, anything anyone needs to say, gentlemen, before we start?
No, I'm all right.
All
All
good.
right. So Jackson, when you're ready, I will start your time.
Okay. All right. I'm good whenever you are.
All right, go for it.
All right. I would say that across Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, there's a certain foundation of shared beliefs that the premise of each religion sort of stacks on top of, right? I think that it's almost like there's like a proto Jewish kind of faith that's shared by all three of those traditions, and um I guess there's sub traditions because there's all the different variations of Christianity and Islam, and there's Baha'i, Rastafarianism, and all that. um I think they all agree on the basic concept of a God of Abraham who created the universe, um and is to somewhat of a personified God who made man in his image, although they all disagree on what exactly that means. They This same God revealed themselves to Abraham, and they believe in the stories of Abraham and his children. And eventually, he revealed himself to Moses and brought the Israelites out of Egypt. And all of the classic Old Testament stories of ancient Israel and such are shared by those three religions. I think Christianity inherently worships the God of Abraham because the claim that Jesus Christ makes in the Gospels is that he is the God of Abraham. Whether or not you want to get into the specifics of the Holy Trinity and all that, I think the premise of Christianity and what was so controversial about Jesus Christ to the Jews of his time was that he was claiming to be the God of Abraham, which, in my opinion, makes at the very least Christianity worship the same God as the Jews. I think the Muslims, the premise of Islam is that Muhammad received the final commandments of God in a cave, right? And then over the rest of his life, the Quran was revealed to him, they say. And that's the final message of the God of Abraham. And they believe that Jews, Christians, and the Jews and the Christians received like incomplete or corrupted messages from God that were further corrupted over the course of those religions' histories, and Muslims believe they have the final copy of it. And Mormonism has a similar premise, but in America, and the Rastafarians have their beliefs, and some of them think that Haile Selassie was the Messiah. But all the things that legitimize those religious beliefs are shared with that same premise of believing in the God of Abraham, the Exodus, and the Abrahamic covenant. It's pretty much all I have to say for an opening, I guess.
Okay, you can see the rest of your time.
Yep.
Okay. So with that, Shresh, so when you are ready, I will start your time. And yeah.
Right,
You
can you
gotta
hear me now?
Yep, that's all good.
All right. So on the question of whether all Abrahamic religions worship the same God, well, I think this comes down to what we see as worship. And worship in the Christian and specifically the Eastern Orthodox paradigm is set out through mainly the divine liturgy, in which we have one sacrifice, one presence, one altar. The Eucharist is the sort of height of our liturgy. It is the continuation of what we see in the Old Testament. And I think this is going to be the key point that sort of takes this argument down, because when we look over to Judaism and over to Islam, and I guess as Jackson mentioned, there is, I guess, Mormonism and Rastafarianism and all these other sort of following sects, but they do not hold the sacrifice that Christianity is specific to, and that is the Eucharist. They do not have the transformation of the bread and wine into body and blood. Now, why is this so important? Well, worship, as we see in the Old Testament, has to be done in a very specific type of way, in the way that God has laid out. We can see from Deuteronomy 12, you must not worship the Lord your God in their way. So he's speaking to the Israelites and talking to them about how the sort of pagans in the surrounding areas worship God. You've got to do it in the way that I set out. And then later on in Deuteronomy 12, he says, you are not to do as we do here today, everyone doing as they see fit. You can't just sort of pick and choose how you worship. You've got to do it in that specific way. And then a crucial point later on in Deuteronomy 12 is be careful not to sacrifice your burnt offerings anywhere you please. And we sort of see this in Leviticus 10 in the story of Nadab and Abihu, two of Aaron's sons, where they put in this unauthorized fire before the Lord. And it states specifically that this was contrary to his command. And the fire consumes the both of them and they perish. So again, this is a key message from the Old Testament that worship must be done in a specific way. So if we look at things from the Christian paradigm, well, we do worship in this specific way through the divine liturgy, through our Eucharist. Well, that's contrary to how the Jewish tradition does it, or how the Islamic tradition does it. So they don't have the other two traditions, they don't have worship. And the same applies individually to each of them. If we presume that the Jewish tradition is true and they are worshiping God, well, then the Christian paradigm can't be worshiping God, and neither can the Islamic paradigm, because again, it's not the exact same type of worship in the specific way laid out. But again, I think another point here is what we're referencing to. So I think Jackson makes this point that they're all coming from this one tradition. And perhaps I could agree to that point. There is a sort of, a prevalent story. Islam, most famously, seems to be taking aspects from both Judaism and Christianity and maybe surrounding Gnostic ideas and melding it into this new religion. However, the deity, the God that is being referenced, isn't the same. In Islam, we have this idea of Tawhid, which is sort of oneness, this strict Unitarian
One
nature
minute.
of, okay, yeah, thanks, of Allah. And this, of course, directly contradicts with what we see in Christianity, which is, of course, three persons: the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So if we have this clear contradiction between the conceptions of God, how can they be the same? Just because they have the same origin point, that being, from that sort of um, Jewish tradition of the Old Testament, that doesn't necessarily make them the same being. In the same way that we all have, I suppose, um, this idea of oneness, it's not the same kind of oneness. Yes, it's one God, but how we express that one God is different. So I think the main point here is that the worship is not the same. We do
That's
not
almost
all.
time.
Yeah, okay. I'll end it there.
Okay, yeah. All right, cool. So all right, so now we're gonna kick
Yeah.
into open discussion. Hold on, let me just set a timer
All
here.
right.
So when y'all gentlemen begin, I'll start the timer. Y'all can just get into it. If
Okay.
it gets too heated, well, I'll get in the middle of it, or Bells will. But otherwise, just keep it respectful, guys, as much
Yep.
as you can. And also, everybody, be sure to tune in for tomorrow's debate as well. Tomorrow, that'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, without further ado, let's go.
All right. So
Okay,
you said something
Jackson, you
really
can go first.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay. You said something kind of interesting there when you were talking about the commandment of worship in the Old Testament, and that
yeah,
um so the perspective I've always had on the Old Testament and the rival gods to the God of Abraham in those stories is that they're different gods, right? There was something you
right,
said that
yes.
I want to clarify this about your perspective before responding to it. Um, do you believe that Moloch and I'm losing the names of like the other pagan gods in the Old Testament, but like
Right,
the
yeah.
god of the Philistines and the god of the in the Babylonians, uh do you believe that those were incorrect ways to worship the true God, or do you believe that those were just different gods that they were worshiping?
Well, I don't really know anything about those gods, but I would definitely say that they are a different god, um,
Okay,
being a different
because
god
that's
being
different from what you
referenced.
said earlier.
What do you mean?
Because earlier, and I'm not meaning to nitpick specific phrasing.
Oh,
If you
that's fine.
genuinely just meant something else, then you meant something else. But you said earlier something about how um like God wants Israel to worship him correctly, and that the pagans were worshiping God incorrectly. I believe that's close to your
Oh,
specific
yeah.
phrasing.
I think the pagans were worshiping their god in their sort of own way, right? I think
So
that's
the
probably
pagans are
what I should have
worshiping their
said.
God. Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay. Yeah. And that's all right. So you think, sorry, not you think, you're saying that that God requires a specific type of worship and a specific conceptualization of him for it to be valid and correct worship. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah,
Okay.
you've got to worship in the correct way. Well, on the
Okay.
matter of if he accepts that worship, it's going to matter to your heart as well. If someone accidentally does something wrong, that I can't really speak for God, but I don't think he would sort of, you know, go after you on that basis.
Okay. So, and you were talking about the importance of the Eucharist and the specific Christian sacraments, and
Yeah.
I can understand that to an extent as somebody who's never personally practiced Christianity, but um I'm so I'm not understanding how that's necessarily different from, say, a Jew who fasts on Yom Kippur, right? That's is fasting on Yom Kippur in Judaism a fair like equivalency to taking the sacrament? Because if it's not, that's okay. But do you understand which holiday I'm referring to?
Yeah, I've heard of Yom Kippur. I'm not too
Okay,
familiar with Judaism as I am with like sort of Islam, but
yeah, no,
I
that's no
think I know
problem.
about a Yom Kippur. Yeah,
Yeah, because
but
that's the Day of Atonement, right? Where
mhm,
they
right,
fast for their sins over the last year, and then that's the forgiveness, because it's a similar replacement to the burnt offering at the temple that Christianity claims to
right.
provide with the
Yes,
crucifixion.
yes,
So isn't that, I mean, so it's a disagreement on the finer specifics, because Christians say that they're eating the blood and body of Christ, and that they're
right.
then joining in with his, or not joining in, but like they are forgiven for their sins because of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Isn't that, how is that dissimilar to a Jew, or a Jew fasting on Yom Kippur, or a Muslim fasting on Ramadan? Um, to In what is their theology a replacement for the same thing, that being the burnt offering at the temple?
Well, because the practice itself is different, right? We have the
Yeah, but
Eucharist; they don't.
aren't there variations in the Eucharist practice within Christianity? Like, does a Coptic do it the same way that a Protestant does?
Yes, but that's taking Christianity in the secular sense, as in Christianity is just someone who believes in the Trinity. What I mean by Christian is specifically Eastern Orthodoxy.
Okay, so you're coming from
Yeah.
a perspective. I'm not even saying that to like. Okay, you're coming from a perspective that Orthodoxy is the only
Right.
Christianity.
Yeah. So
Okay.
as an Eastern Orthodox, we'd see, I don't know, like, a Protestant doing their sort of Eucharist as invalid, right? Because it's not how we do it.
Hmm. But like, and I'm not saying this to disrespect your specific religious
That's fine.
position or to attempt to disprove it, but if you step outside of the perspective of Orthodoxy, what makes you specifically the culture with the right tradition? Who's to say that a Catholic in Mexico in that specific, like, falling through the cracks in that way, and in that tradition being on the opposite sides of each schism, who's to say that that's not the true Christianity and you're practicing the incorrect Christianity? Like, what gives you that confidence?
Are you asking, like, what makes me think Eastern Orthodoxy is true?
Yeah. I'm not asking you specifically about Christianity. I'm saying if we're already accepting Christianity, the New Testament, and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and
Right.
his resurrection, what specifically makes Eastern Orthodoxy
Oh,
correct?
well, I would say that they've kept the tradition. I could also point out how in um, other sects of Christianity, like Protestantism, they come out from the 1500s. They're not similar to the early church. I could point out flaws in their theology, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, for me, the main thing would be that Eastern Orthodoxy is the continuation of the church that was built by the apostles and Jesus Christ. It's the most similar. Like, there's nothing else that's quite like it.
So it's the continuation for you.
Yes.
Okay, but from so I'm not actually, so forgive me, I'm not actually very educated on the specifics of the Great Schism between
But
Western Catholics and
right.
Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
Um, is it that the Vatican Catholics, just for, because I'm losing whatever the correct term would be, like,
Right.
is it that, like, the Vatican split off and, like, seceded from the Union, or was it like an equal split that took place?
Well, it was in 1054. That's the year of
Hmm.
the schism, and uh, I'm not too familiar with the history, but funnily enough, it was actually over like what kind of bread was being used by the Western Rite and the Eastern Rite. But this kind of like schism had already been sort of building up over the previous years. But yeah, in 1054, they schismed, and then the Eastern Orthodox and then the sort of Catholic Church, the Western churches, they stopped communion with each other. I believe that's how the story goes.
Okay,
And the main thing is communion, right? Like, communion is how we determine sort of what a true church is.
so then, regardless of what of what the actual objective true communion practice is, if if it was, like, within how both of us understand this now, if it was that both churches just stopped agreeing to meet with each other and collaborate, then, um and we're going for originality, why wouldn't it then be the church that's still based out of Rome?
Wait, could you? I don't think I'm understanding your question. Could you say that again?
Yeah, no, sorry, that was because it was kind of a strange, like, but so if we're coming from a perspective, right, where Christianity becomes the dominant religion of the Roman Empire before it split into the Western and Eastern Roman Empire, Constantine becomes a state religion. You have the Council of Nicaea, and Nicene Christianity is founded as the state religion of Rome, and then both, so the Roman Empire splits and eventually the church splits, and you're saying that Eastern Orthodox Christianity is a true Christianity because it's like the least modified and, like, the closest to what the early church was.
Right. Yeah.
If we're going off of, like, just being, like, the right tradition that was on the right side of all the
Yep.
schisms, what makes it the Eastern tradition and not the tradition still based out of Rome?
Oh, okay. Okay. So Why
Yeah.
Eastern and not Catholic? Okay. Well, I think there's quite a lot of reasons. One big reason for me personally would be Vatican II. That is an ecumenical council that the Catholics
Mhm.
had, and what I see in there is a lot of sort of new doctrines being made that are contrary to previous doctrines in the Catholic Church, and it's these are these are dogmas that you have to accept, but then how can you accept contradictions? I mean, that's one thing that I find um, that sort of breaks away Catholicism. Another thing is, well, I don't really agree that there should be a pope, and that there was a pope in the sort of first 1,000 years of the church. And what I mean by that is that I don't really see
Mm.
this Vatican I model of the Pope. Um, does that sort of make
Yeah, no,
sense?
I that makes sense. But then how can you tell me though if because you're talking earlier about the Old Testament and worshiping correctly and how God's picky about people not worshiping in their specific way that they see to be right, because there's a idea of objective morality coming from God, and therefore you want to go with what God wants and not what you as an individual wants. If that makes sense. Sorry, I think I
Right.
phrased that funny,
No, no, I think I get what you're
but
saying. Yeah.
yeah, so sorry, hold on, I have to find where I was going there. Sorry. um, shit, where was I? Sorry. Oh my god.
You were saying sort of like objective morality. That's what you mentioned,
Oh yeah, that's
and
right. Yep, yeah, yep.
yeah,
So you were saying that you take issue with the Vatican Catholic tradition because you don't think like the practice of the papacy and probably a lot of finer specifics like that.
right.
You don't think are the true way to worship, even though, as you said, they had a pope for the first 1,000 years of church history. So
Well, they would see, so from the Catholic paradigm,
Mhm.
they would see a pope being present in the first 1,000 years from Peter and his successors. But from my paradigm, I don't see that as being true at all.
Okay, so this is actually a disagreement about the history between Orthodoxy and Catholicism.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, then I'm if it's contested like that and your perspective disagrees, then I'm not even going to use that then. Um, what I guess I will ask then is if there are so many differences in the history between like what the Catholics think happened within the tradition, where the Catholics think that there's an unbroken line of popes and you disagree, um, and you have disagreements on doctrine like the Vatican II and
Right.
such. What actually specifically makes Orthodoxy the winning Christianity here, where it's closer to the truth? Like I'm not understanding what about that actually makes it like the correct one.
Well, from my perspective, there has to be one true church
Mhm.
present throughout all ages. The gates of hell will never prevail. So based on that, okay, there has to be one true visible church. If that's the case, then well, I could just sort of do what I did here and just go through all the other churches, see if they have contradictions, if they have any internal faults, and I find Eastern Orthodoxy to be the one that's sort of clean. It's solid.
Okay.
Another thing is, a lot of their practices and traditions are similar to the early church, right? The whole practice of icons. I mean, that
Hmm.
in itself that takes out pretty much all of the Protestant tradition because they don't sort of really use icons at all. Another thing is fasting. Fasting was sort of pretty integral to the early Christians, and that sort of continued in Eastern Orthodoxy.
Yeah, but if we're going off of just what traditions are preserved. Okay, you know what? Actually, I have a question for you then, because
Yeah.
this might bridge our two perspectives a little. If you think Eastern Orthodoxy is the true Christianity,
Right.
and that just from my understanding, you don't count any Christianity that is not Eastern Orthodox to be truly Christian, correct?
Yeah, that would be seen as
Okay.
heterodox. Yeah.
Do you think then that it might be fair to say that there are theologies of Islam and theologies of Protestant Christianity that might be similar? Is that fair? So I'm not attacking your Eastern Orthodox Christianity.
No,
We can say
don't. Yeah, no,
that
it's fine.
exists in a bubble, right? If that exists in a bubble, and all
Okay.
other Christianity is about as untrue as Islam, right?
Wait, could you say
What
that part
then is
again?
the
You just
difference
sort of cut
between?
out.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, because I'm outside and it's starting to rain, so
No,
that
it's
could
all
be my
right.
service starting to go. But so uh, if from your point of view, for all of human history, or pretty much all of countable like biblical human history, there has been a church continuation that you
Yeah,
believe has gone from at the very least Jesus Christ
yeah,
to today,
that's
and
right.
that's
Yeah.
even so. And then you would also say, being a Christian, that there is the original tradition of Israel that has carried since the Exodus to the time of Jesus Christ, and then possibly to today with the Jewish diaspora, right? And that not being the same tradition as Eastern Orthodox Christianity, but do you acknowledge the existence of that tradition?
Of so whether the Old Testament Jews are the same as the Jews today
Yeah,
is
we
that?
don't have to get into like the ethnic similarity and all that, but
Oh no, no, no. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if we just
I get
accept
what
the
you mean.
premise that there's a diaspora that left Israel and Judea with the fall of the Second Temple, which, to your credit, Jesus Christ prophesized, um, uh, and we say that they went through Europe and they did that whole thing, and then they kept their religion and into the modern world, right? Is that the same tradition, or at least a descendant tradition of biblical Israel, the way that
Oh, okay,
Christianity
yeah.
observes, right?
So so there's two ways. It's gonna sound weird, but there's two ways to kind of answer that question. From the Christian and specifically, I guess, Eastern Orthodox perspective, we would say that the Jews of the Old Testament, they're all sort of foretelling and looking towards Christ, and they have, that's sort of looking forward to the Messiah, which we see as Christ. And we would see then a difference between those Jews and the Jews of today, which have sort of rejected Christ. But from
Hmm.
a secular point of view, I guess you could say that they're the same group of people, right? Like, yes, they had that theological difference of rejecting Christ,
Hmm.
but in a way, I guess maybe even ethnically, they are that sort of continuation.
Okay.
Um, I think, yeah, that would be the best way I could answer that question.
Okay. And then, so if that's one continuation, and then let's say you say that they break off by rejecting Christ, right? So that's where they branch off. If we just imagine one big tree, and each religion is like a family tree branching off of this central original biblical branch. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah.
there's one point where the Jews break off, and then from your point of view, there's one point where the Catholics break off, and then there's
Yeah.
one point where the Muslims break off from their own like parallel tradition, where they reject both um the Old and New Testament, and then they have their New Testament with the Quran. Um, would you say then, as a believer in the true Christianity, and I'm not saying that incredulously, um, like for you as a believer in the true Christianity, is there really a like a strong theological difference between um let's say a Catholic and a Lutheran? We'll just say first. We'll stay within Christianity here. A Catholic and a Lutheran.
Uh, sure. I don't know all the tenets of Lutheranism, but, Catholicism, you've got to sort of submit to the Pope, right? Like, that's essential. Lutherans
Okay.
don't. That'd be one thing.
Anecdotally, I know plenty of Catholics that hate the Pope that are would you consider them to not be valid Catholics?
Oh, that's a whole other mess. Yeah, I know. There's like Sedevacantibus. There was the SSPX,
Hmm.
but because everyone has their own paradigm and everyone believes that they see themselves as being correct. But if we
Hmm.
take, let's say, Catholicism, then yes, you would have to submit to the Pope. The Pope is necessary, and if you don't, you're outside of the church, and you're a heretic or a schismatic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then all that just because of all the specific BS that comes with Catholicism, all oh man, okay, because that's interesting because I disagree just on defining a religion by its practice, but within that view, I can't really like dispute that, you know. Um, hmm, okay, so hmm, that's interesting actually because do you have much leadership in Eastern Orthodoxy that you have to look to the because you were saying that you're anti-papacy, so I would assume not, but.
Well, we believe that we follow the sort of same model that was practiced in the early church, which is, um, you have bishops, then priests, then sort of deacons, and then lay people. We don't believe in this idea
Mhm.
that there was this one super bishop, Bishop of Rome, the
Mhm.
Pope, that sort of defined dogma for everyone else, right? That sort of led everyone in that way. Like, um, yeah, we would reject that. I mean, yeah, that'd be it, really.
Okay. Well, hmm. Would you say so? There's really no like because I want you to answer honestly and not worry about being
Don't worry. Yeah.
offensive to Catholics or anything. Um,
Don't worry. Don't worry.
do you do, do you think do you think like somebody who practices Catholicism and accepts Jesus Christ as their Lord and
Right.
Savior, in your view, are they saved?
Well, so on the person itself, I can't make a definitive statement on whether someone is
Oh, that's
saved or not.
interesting.
Yeah. So, like, and this is pretty
So you don't
clear.
believe in like once saved, always saved.
No, no, no. We don't believe in that. No. Like, you could lose
Okay.
salvation. That's
How do
something.
you believe in salvation then?
That's
Um.
tomorrow's debate, by the way.
Yeah. I'm probably not equipped to really answer that question too much, but Uh,
Hmm.
from what I understand, we don't believe in once saved, always saved. It's something that you can lose. Um,
Really?
but salvation is in the church. Like, the
Hmm.
church is seen as the new ark. Um, but we've got to be really careful here because we can't say like where the we can't say exactly where the church is, if that makes sense, right? Like, you
Hmm.
know, there could be someone in, this is a pretty common example, right? But someone in North Sentinel Island who's never been preached the gospel, I can't say for sure that they're never, that they won't be saved, that they're damned to hell or whatever, because, we believe in things like baptism of desire. And of course, God can work through his extraordinary ways to save people who are righteous, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's something that we hold to.
Hmm. Okay. So, hmm. All right.
And that's something that I believe the Catholics also hold to as well. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting. Is that 'cause that's it reminds me of there's an old like joke or saying I've heard from rabbis as a criticism of Christianity. That's like if you imagine a missionary going to, let's say, the North Sentinel Island,
right.
right? And he shows up and he sits down with a native and he spends an hour preaching the gospel to him. And he says, "Do you have any questions?" And the native gentleman replies, um, "Where would I have gone? Um, if I'd never heard about Jesus Christ and the gospel, and neither accepted it or like denied it, and the missionary says, "Oh, well, for not knowing about Christ, you just go to heaven automatically." And the native asks, "Well, why did you tell me about him?"
Yeah,
Right?
that's a bit of a
Yeah, oh, I'm
mischaracterization
sure it
there,
is.
but
So tell
but
me
yeah,
tell me
I've
how
heard
I'm
that
wrong
joke.
then, or
Yeah.
well, not wrong, but like tell me what's the promise, the problem with the premise of that statement.
Well, that assumes that you're going to go to heaven guaranteed if you don't hear about Christ, right? Like
Okay.
you're not guaranteed to go to heaven, right? Like that's we can't give a
Hmm.
definitive statement um, about whether you're going to heaven or hell or not. So that priest would have been wrong for saying, "Oh yeah, you would have definitely gone to heaven if I
Okay.
didn't come to you."
So then within the internal logic of that theology, and I'm sure this is like a cliche question that you probably have like a million like theological justifications for, but like uh why would God make so many people and so many cultures and have these people live out these full lives away from the Christian world, whether or not they're righteous or not? Why would he condemn so many of them to hell? Because
Well,
like yeah,
okay, yeah,
sorry,
sorry,
yeah.
go. No, 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 go. You can finish.
No. I'll actually, because I'd be gish galloping if I kept going. So
Okay.
you can answer that.
Um, well, I would say first of all, that sort of assumes that you know what is best, right? So that's
Hmm.
sort of we believe God is sort of all knowing, right?
Hmm.
All so he has this sort of conception that is beyond us. So these things would probably fall into some plan of the greater good. And to make a statement on, oh, why not do it this way? Well, that assumes that this way is the better way. Well, how do you know that? We don't actually know that, right? I guess that would be the easiest reply I could think of.
So you're entirely just dependent on your faith in Christ then to like you have no idea if anything you're doing from a moral or a theological standpoint is the correct way to do it, and you're like am I understanding that correctly?
I don't think so. What do you mean by that?
Well, so you were just saying that we have no way of knowing what the best way is, right? Or like what the correct
Well,
way
oh, I
to.
should specify that. So
Okay.
we have no way of knowing what is like good and bad without God. Because I believe God is the sort
Really?
of foundation for morality. Yeah.
So do you do you believe in an objective biblical morality? Just because that's a common idea among Christians that like do you believe in that?
Yeah, I would hold to objective morality.
So if there exists objective morality, why is it inaccessible to humans?
Why isn't it?
Yeah, like if there exists an objective morality that can be understood biblically, even what actually makes it inaccessible to human beings?
What do you mean by inaccessible?
Because you were saying that we have no way of knowing what is um like
Oh, right. Yeah.
what's right, what's, but then you also say there's an objective morality. So if you're doing X moral action, um you could be simultaneously
Well,
contradicting an objective
we
morality
can
while
know
also.
we can
Mhm.
know objective morals, and that is through the laws that God has sent down to us and through His church.
Mhm.
So,
That's how. Oh,
I do
sorry.
want
Go
to
on.
say we're kind of well, we are at the halfway point of the debate. We'll say Jackson has been asking the majority of the questions. So I want
Mhm.
to ask you, maybe you want to shift sides and
Sure.
Oh,
Shresh
yeah.
can do some questioning.
We could just like finish off on this little thing, and then I can
Yeah,
have a
yeah.
Yeah,
sit
yeah. So
around.
you
Yeah.
can finish your thing, ask me whatever you want after. There we go.
All right. Yeah. So what was I? Yeah, we would take our morality um, from the laws that God has sent down from the church teachings, things like that, from the
Hmm.
Bible as well. Uh, yeah, so certain things are knowable, but because of our sort of nature as finite beings, we can't know everything, right?
Hmm.
Does that sort of answer your question?
I mean, I guess like, all right, like I'll give you that, but
It's not
all
always a
right,
satisfying. I get what you mean. It's not always a
yeah,
satisfying answer, but for me, like it does logically sort of make sense, right? Like I think we all want to know, oh, why this way, why that way, but certain things, I think we just have to accept that we can't really
yeah.
ever
It's
know.
classics. This is like in the
Yeah,
in the book of Job when
yeah.
Job is
I was
like,
going to
it's
bring
like,
that up.
why
Yeah,
God, and then he's like, do you know like what a deer thinks? Like, does that
yeah.
whole like, yeah, okay, all right,
Well, okay. Guess it's my turn to ask the questions.
yep,
So I guess on this idea of so you believe that all these religions, they worship the same god, as in
mhm.
through their practices, but also that they are sort of referring to the same god, right? Or it's the same being that's being referenced. Is that what you believe?
Yeah. I think what's taking place is there's like a basic understanding of the God of Abraham, which I think kind of like any true objective deity that could exist. I think the majority of their nature is described by the beliefs that are shared between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and that being that there is a singular, all powerful creator God who um made the universe in 7 days, and and Jews don't. I've never met a Jew that actually believes the universe was created within a week. They all say that's a metaphor, right? And there's all the different
Right.
like interpretations of scripture, but they all agree on Genesis. They all agree on the book of Genesis and the events of the book of Genesis. They they agree on the Exodus. They even agree on like the laws given to Moses. And I feel like the Torah, like just the five books of Moses, is a pretty complete self-contained religion, in my opinion. And I like, is that a fair thing to say? And because I heard you breathe in there, like,
Oh, yeah. I was just going to pick
yeah.
up on a point you said. So
Hmm.
you said that it all comes from a sort of shared set of beliefs. Is that correct? Like, and
To an
then you
extent, yeah.
mentioned
Like, obviously, they
singular.
have different ideas about what God is,
Right. Okay. But
but
if it's a different conception, then how can it be the same, if that makes sense? The same
because
God.
there's so to be fair to your perspective, you consider there to only be one true Christianity. But if I'm coming from a perspective that considers Christianity to be at large just one big religion, it's a common American Protestant view, and I can already tell it's not one that you share. To be fair, but I've often heard Christianity or Christendom referred to as the total of all the Protestants and all the Catholics and all the Eastern Orthodox and the Ethiopians and etc. Um, and so within that view of Christianity, um, there are so many finer differences in like the sects of Christianity that I think are about as different as the differences between what you believe and what like a Sunni Muslim believes. You know, um, because like some would argue that Mormonism is a type of Christianity, and this is a pretty extreme example, right? The Mormons believe that like Jesus Christ went to America, and that like the lost tribe of Israel was the Native Americans, but not the Native Americans that we know of, right? And they have all this like cosmology about like the planets and stuff that like doesn't exist in, say, um and we go on like all the way on the other side of the spectrum, like an Eastern Orthodox such as yourself, like you don't believe in Joseph Smith or the lost tribe of Israel being Native Americans, like that's all from your point of view, that's like wacko nonsense, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's just, if we're, whether or not your religion is true, if those are both Christianity, it's kind of like, I don't see how there can't exist like a greater Abrahamic window that Islam, Judaism, Rastafarianism exists inside of neighboring Christianity.
Well, I think that just again sort of confuses secular conception of Christianity with my conception of Christianity, because
Yeah,
I
which
think
I admit
those,
they're quite different.
yeah, like I think even if there are small differences, that's still a difference, right? I don't differentiate. Well, I do, but a small difference is still a difference. A big difference is still a difference. Like no matter what, how small the difference is, that's still going to differentiate you from outside of the church, right? Like that's how I would see it as. So just as how a Protestant or a Catholic might have a small difference compared to Eastern Orthodox, and a Mormon has a huge difference, there's still different religions being practiced there. Does that
Okay,
sort of make sense?
but they can be different religions and still like sharing in the, because let's say the Hellenistic pagans, right?
Right,
There you could have the church, or sorry, like the cult of Ares, and like a temple of Zeus or whatever, and those are completely different religions, and they would go to war with each other, right?
right,
But within their greater mythology, their gods coexisted, right?
right.
So, and I'm not saying that that's how, but I think that shows you can have different religions within the same like basic worldviews, you know. And I'm not saying that Judaism, Islam, and Christianity are the same religion, but I think they share the same God, you know.
Okay, that yeah, okay. I think I understand. So, but that's where exactly where I disagree, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
think it is the same God. I mean, we have Allah clearly as being this Unitarian being, and you'd probably know more than me, but I'm assuming the same in Judaism, where they hold a Unitarian belief as well.
Well, there's an old saying about Judaism specifically that you could ask 7 Jews to describe Jewish theology and you'll get 10 different answers, right? And so I've see that's kind of the thing, right? Is like I've heard Jewish interpretations of the Old Testament that are almost Trinitarian,
Right,
right? Where they'll talk about the aspects of God, and then they'll say that the different names of God in the Old Testament are referring to the different persons within God.
right,
I've met I've met Jews that say that God is logic, right? And then like I've met ones that like, so you know, and like whether or not he has a personified physical form or not, and like whether or
right.
not it's literal or a metaphor whenever he appears physically in the Old Testament. So like, but maybe this is a cultural difference in how we actually define what a religion is, because like I think that a Jew who believes that God is a metaphor for logic, and a Jew that believes in a complicated personified God with 18 different names and aspects, I think that's the same religion, and I think these two hypothetical Jews would agree. So it's an interesting perspective difference that you would draw the lines between religions at every difference in the practice.
Um, well, I have to be. It's not necessarily every practice, but
Every
rather,
practice of note, we could say.
yeah, there are specific practices that have to be sort of done for you to be considered like true Eastern Orthodox, right?
Hmm.
There are certain things like even in Eastern Orthodox, there's sort of different. This might sound strange, but there's sort of different churches. There's Russian Orthodox. There's
Yep.
so on and so on. But they all share this specific commonality, which comes from, they all say the creed. They all believe in the same God. They all have the same sort of liturgy. Um, and when it comes to Protestants, right, they have a clear difference to us in the things that we have defined as mattering. So,
Hmm.
um,
Okay.
but okay, when it comes to God, hmm, that's actually quite an interesting perspective. So
Yeah.
so even if the conception is different, you still believe it's the same.
Yeah, because in my view, a Jew is somebody who is a member of the ethno religion, either by birth or by conversion. And conversion being a specific process laid out in both the Old Testament and the Talmud. Um, and that anybody who then participates in the religion by fasting on Yom Kippur and like actually I think Yom Kippur is pretty much the only prerequisite theologically to be a Jew, at least that I know of. um
Right.
I would consider anybody who meets all of those requirements to be a Jew religiously.
Uh,
And I'm aware that
okay.
Judaism is a
Yeah.
much broader umbrella than
Yeah.
Christianity, but I think to an extent that's how I view Christianity from the outside. Is like I I think of a Protestant being a part of the same religion as somebody like you, right? And maybe that's unfair, right?
Yeah, I think that's the key sort of difference we're having is that no, the
Yeah.
Protestant doesn't have the same religion as us. Like even if
Mhm.
I grant you that, I mean, I'd be happy to accept that, all these uh, differences in theology with all these Jews are still Jewish
Mhm.
of the religion. That's fine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Eastern Orthodox and Protestant are the same religion.
Yeah, because we could just say that Christianity is a much narrower definition, or it has a much narrower definition, and isn't necessarily. You can maybe say Christian is just an adjective to describe a type of theology. Then,
Yeah, from a
yeah,
secular sense, yeah,
okay,
Christianity just describes anyone who
yeah,
believes in the Trinity.
okay. Then, all right, because so if that's our definition of religion, right? I guess we're gonna have to zoom out here and look at like the greater differences between the three main religious divides, that being
Right.
Christianity, Islam, and Judaism.
Yeah.
So I think it. Oh man, yeah. Hold on, 'cause I'm having to, because like that's an interesting way to look at like what a religion is. So I'm having to kind of pivot there, but
Oh, that's actually where I wanted
so
to go.
yeah, so Islam, right? I don't actually, to be honest, I don't actually know what the difference between Sunni and Shiite Islam is specifically. I know it's something in who they accepted as the leadership after the death of Muhammad,
Yeah.
right? So maybe a Muslim with a similar perspective to you might say like, oh, my flavor of Sunni Islam is Islam, and I wouldn't consider a Shiite Muslim to be Muslim,
Right.
but they both agree on the Quran, and they agree on Allah and like Muhammad as his final prophet, right?
Right.
I But then we're considering them different religions based on the finer practice. They're still agreeing on like a wider, like say, let's say, um Nation of Islam in America, right, as like a
Right.
separate type of Islam to, let's say, Shiite Islam, and I want to say Iraq. They might consider themselves different religions the way that you consider yourself to have a different religion from a Lutheran, but you would say that both of them worship Allah, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so whether or not they're doing it right, you would say that other Christians worship Jesus Christ and the God of Abraham, right?
Oh, would I consider other Christians as worshipping?
Yeah,
Jesus.
whether or not they're doing it correctly. Like, are they doing that?
Well, no, because from my perspective, worship has to be done in a
That's right.
specific
Worship is
way.
specific.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. But so then, would you say? Hmm. Okay, so then you might actually consider some types of worship across types of Islam then.
Sure. There
Because
certainly might be.
just because like I'm thinking about it with like because if I asked you the same question about Islam, you'd be in like you'd be your internal logic would be in the clear if you said that Nation of Islam and a Shiite Muslim do worship different gods. So that's interesting, right? I we might have to come up with like a second word we agree on then that because worship is a specific theological term to you,
Yes,
whereas
but then there's
I'm
also
because I'm not meaning to argue
general
definitions
worship,
here. Just
perhaps. General worship.
yeah, okay, general worship, just as in like. So we could say that somebody who's in the Nation of Islam and a Shiite Muslim still generally worship the same God.
Yeah, that definitely is
Okay,
true.
so then would you say that you and a Lutheran generally worship Jesus Christ?
Um, yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
Okay, so you and
the specific worship is
we'll say
different, but the general worship, this
yeah,
idea of general worship
yeah.
is still the
So
same. Yeah.
yeah, so you generally worship Jesus Christ, and all other Christians that be, a Christian being somebody who, as you said earlier, believes in the Holy Trinity. All Christians generally worship Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So then, would you say that if the premise of Christianity is that Jesus Christ, so actually, I'm going to confirm this first. You would say that Jesus Christ claimed to be the God of Abraham from the Old Testament, right? And that was
Yes.
okay. So then, would you say that Christians and Jews both generally worship the God of Abraham?
Christians and sure
Because
that
if you believe Jesus Christ is the God of Abraham, you're worshiping the God of Abraham, correct?
oh well, I don't see Jews as referring to the same God because they don't have the Trinity.
But see, that's I'm not sure I agree with you actually because so we could totally reconstruct the Holy Trinity and the theology, well, the theological vision of the Trinity that you can come test on. You could probably something equivalent with the Old Testament. I'm sure within all of the different accolades and names given to God throughout the Old Testament, you could isolate the personalities of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. I'm not sure if that's like an okay thing to do theologically from your point of view, but like I
You cut
permissible
out
within
there for a bit.
Judaism. Yeah. So
Wait, hello.
yeah, hi.
Yeah,
But
Jackson, you had cut out. You got to repeat that.
oh shit, did I? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, 'cause fucking weather's picking up. My bad. Pardon my French. But so, where was I? So, oh man, that's picking up. Okay, my bad. Um, so you would say because you share the Trinity with a Protestant that you generally worship Jesus Christ, but because mainstream Judaism lacks the Trinity, you do not generally worship the same God.
Yeah, I would say that the referent is different here
Okay.
because if the nature of God is or God with um, apostrophes there, if the nature of God is different, then that's a
Mhm.
different deity being referred to. Like you have to get the specific nature correct.
Yeah, but hmm. But an Ethiopian Christian, for example, they're Unitarian Christians. They
Uh,
they have a different way of explaining the relation between Jesus Christ and God, with Jesus Christ as God. That's different from the Trinity. I forget how it specifically works, but
Yeah. So the same thing would apply in that case. I don't think Ethiopians are Unitarian, but they have a
Mhm.
different conception in how Christ's natures works with us. But
Hmm.
again, in the same aspect, because they don't have the correct sort of understanding or the correct formulation, it's not the same deity being referenced to.
Hmm. Okay. So
But
that's just that.
even if it's
Mhm.
the same deity, the worship is still different, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. They from what I know of, they uh they have the Eucharist and all that. And they have they
Yeah.
they eat the body and blood. But okay, so then if the Trinity is what's so important, then if we say an Orthodox Jew who believes in a Unitarian God and a Muslim who believes in a Unitarian God, and they both believe that their God is the God of Abraham,
Right.
do the Jew and the Muslim generally worship the same God?
Um, I mean, if they're getting the sort of same theological natures correct, then I would probably see that as being referring to the same God.
Okay, so then th- that kind of just creates two two schools of thought then, right? About Abrahamic religion, that there's either a Unitarian God that can be believed in by either Muslims or Jews, or there's a Trinitarian God that can be believed in by that can be generally worshipped by all Christians, not necessarily Eastern Orthodox Christians.
Wait, sorry, could you say that again?
Yeah. Okay. So would you say then that there are like two schools of thought about the God of Abraham then, that kind of make the two types of tradition, where you can either believe in a Unitarian
Oh
single
yeah,
God
yeah.
which would make
There's
you
the
either a Jew or
Trinity,
a
and then
Muslim.
there's Unitarian. Yeah.
Okay. And then if there also exist Unitarian Christianities, does that mean that there are Christians, Jews, and Muslims? Christian referring to not necessarily a Trinitarian Christian, but somebody who would identify their theology as Christian and they believe in Jesus Christ as
Yeah,
God.
there are Unitarian Christians. Yeah,
Yeah.
those do
So
exist.
they're all generally worshiping the same God, right?
Uh, with
If they pretty much agree on the nature past what Jesus Christ is, basically, if it's not a Trinitarian God.
Yeah. Well, we would see anything that isn't sort of really God as being sort of. We would see them as worshipping demons, really. So we
Hmm.
would see them as, yeah, they're all worshipping that same sort of being. Well, we wouldn't see them as worshipping. Let me get my words right here. We wouldn't
Yeah.
see them as worshipping a god, more as
Mhm.
because we only believe in one god. We would see them as worshipping demons. Yeah.
Okay. So, would you say it's a shared demon that's worshipped across Judaism, Islam, and Unitarian Christianity? Then,
Good question. I don't really know. Maybe it's just one demon just sort of pulling the strings along, or maybe it's multiple demons at work.
hmm
I don't really know, but either
but
way,
on
it's
a
not God.
conceptual level, yeah.
Either
Well,
way,
so
it's just
then,
not God.
yeah. But so there's not God as a Unitarian conceptualization. This separate being that we can acknowledge hypothetically, we'll call him not God. How's that?
Yeah,
Not
sure.
God exists, and he's a Unitarian God that they worship. Um, do would you then say that all Muslims, all Jews, and all Unitarian Christians worship the same not God?
Um, I don't. It could be the case. It could not.
Okay,
Approaching the last 5 minutes of open, guys. Just telling
Yeah.
you.
okay. I'm gonna say around that 5 minute mark. I'm gonna leave and rejoin real quick. By the way, just letting you know. But okay, well, cool. But yeah. So we can finish talking here real quick. So all right, because I would say, from a secular point of view, it's not that I'm speaking from a secular point of view. I'm speaking from a Unitarian Universalist point of view in my personal beliefs here. But if we're examining this from a secular perspective, what actually makes the difference then between the Unitarian worships? You know, like not encroaching
It
on
would probably be
Trinitarian
their own
Christianity.
practices, right? Like
Mhm.
Muslims do their, their daily prayers, their own fasting. Jews have their own prayers and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So we can differentiate them in that way.
All right.
But either
But
way, that worship is still different. It's a different practice altogether.
yeah, it's a different practice, but they would you say that they have the same general concept of God, that it was one God who brought the Israelites out of Egypt, who claims to have created the universe himself, says he's the only God. That concept remains, right?
Um, so you're saying that they both share, they are sharing the same conception of God from the Old
Yeah,
Testament.
yeah. If we exclude Trinitarian true Christianity from that,
Yeah.
then they're all pretty much worshiping the God of Abraham, right?
Um, I would say, well, worship.
Oh
That's
yeah,
the key
let's
word
say,
there.
yep. Sorry, caught
Or are
myself.
they
Generally
referring to?
worshiping.
Do you general? Well, I think there might be some theological differences just because in
Mhm.
Islam versus Judaism, well, Islam might have different sort of what's it called? Different descriptions of how God acts, and his nature and things like that. So there's probably a difference in that respect.
Hmm. Okay. How much time we got?
Just roughly 2.5 minutes left.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool.
So
All
is
right.
that a good stopping point for y'all? Is there any other questions y'all want to get out?
No, I mean I'm interested in further discuss. I'm honestly, my phone's about to die, so I had to switch devices. That's all.
Okay. I mean, so then maybe that's a good time to transition to closing statements.
Yeah, I'd be
Yeah.
happy to move on to that. Yeah.
So, all right. So if
Okay.
you want to do that, then Shresh will get the first closing statement. So
Yeah.
All
let me
right.
So
just
give me
restart the
give
timer.
me yeah give me 1 second. Sorry, I'll be right back.
No problem. No problem.
Yep.
Uh,
Oh, you back. Come on.
all right. When he's back, we'll get into that. But no. Well, I'll wait to say this when he gets back. Oh yeah. And anyone who just joined, be sure to tune in tomorrow and also catch this replay if you missed it. But tune in tomorrow as I'll be taking on Ortho Bells on Once Saved, Always
Yeah.
Saved. That'll be tomorrow at
Okay.
8 Central Time. Okay, so now Jackson's back. So Shresh, you will get your
Yep.
5 minute closing statement. If you want to use the whole five, feel free. But you have at least up to 5 minutes.
All right.
So I'll start the
So,
time when you start.
well, I would say that through this debate, we've seen that no, the Abrahamic religions do not all worship the same God. A being that their sort of practices are different in Christianity, and specifically Eastern Orthodox Christianity is what my reference to Christianity is, has its own form of practicing in worshiping God through the Eucharist, through the liturgy, through its own prayers and fasting. And when we look over to the other Abrahamic religions, that being Judaism and Islam, and all of their own sects within those two religions, they have their own different ways of worshipping what they believe to be God. So we can see that the physical practices themselves are different. And as I've highlighted in my opening statement, the way in which you worship is very important. Uh, to God, as we can see from the Old Testament. And B, we can also see that the referent is not the same. The nature of God, as described by the other two Abrahamic religions, is different. From Islam, we have this idea of Tawhid, Unitarian deity, with no offspring, no sons, no partners, so on, and therefore no three persons, no Trinity. So again, the nature of God itself is different in Islam, and we see a um, similar conception in Judaism, of course, with their outright explicit rejection of Christ as the Messiah and Christ as God. And we also see that they do believe that God is one, even though within Judaism there may be many conflicting beliefs. All in all, they still reject Christ as God. And I think with that, I'll wrap it up there, showing how the Abrahamic religions do not worship the same God.
Okay, conceding the rest of your time.
Yep.
All right. So, Jackson, now for your up to 5 minute closing statement, whenever
All
you're
right.
ready.
I would say a lot of our disagreement is on definitions. I think that so to be completely fair to Shresh and his perspective, I think his argument is a much more theological one than mine. So I think in the discussion we had here, so we outlined a difference between a Unitarian perspective and a Trinitarian perspective. And in, in my opinion, with all due respect to Christianity and with all due respect to Eastern Orthodoxy, from my outside point of view as a non-believer, I do not think the Trinity distinction is enough to consider their gods to be different concepts, generally speaking. I think obviously it's apples and oranges to compare like Jesus Christ and the personhood of Jesus in Christianity with the explicitly inhuman, unknowable God of Islam, right? But I do think overall, conceptually, they are gods with the same powers that have a lot more in common with each other when compared to when we look at how different non-Abrahamic religions are to each other. I think as much as these are all different religions and with different practices and histories, at the end of the day, they do agree on the Old Testament and the concepts of God described in the Old Testament. The specific truth of Eastern Orthodoxy, I can't speak to because I can't speak objectively to what religion is true and not true because I'm only a man, right? This was a great discussion though. I honestly learned some things. Um, yeah, I maintain overall that the general concept of the God of Abraham is shared across these religions, but Trinitarian Christianity does set itself apart from Unitarian Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. I think that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for this fantastic debate. It was very fascinating. I think a lot of good information got out there and a lot of perspectives were conveyed. So, thank y'all so much. We're gonna go ahead and close this out. Of course, thanks Ortho Bells for the formal debates platform, and thanks to the speakers for showing up and participating in this debate, and the people in the crowd, and all those who will listen to the replay. So, with that, we're gonna go ahead and end this live, and we will see you at the next debate. That is tomorrow at 8 p.m. Central Time on Is OSAS Biblical? So, I've been Papa Kratos. God bless you all.
Yeah,
See ya.
God bless.
God bless everyone.
All right.